CEO of Fatma Clinic. Hello and welcome, doctor.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
It's always a pleasure to have you here, especially since it's all about the awareness of autism.
True.
So can you tell us more about autism?
Of course. April is very unique or very important for autism. 2nd of April is the day of autism, and we always consider April is the month of autism. So autism, when we talk about it, it's a neurodevelopmental disorder that affects children and their development in the very early years of life, mainly in the first 3 years. And it affects 3 parts or 3 areas of development: the language development, being verbal and nonverbal, the social communication, and then the repetitive behavior with the limited interests.
It's very interesting that you say it happens and develops.
And nonverbal, the social communication, and then the repetitive behavior with the limited interests.
It's very interesting that you say it happens and develops at a very young age.
True.
And it's very hard maybe for the parents to detect the different signs, because at that young age their kids are still developing with, for example, speech or movement.
True.
So how would the parents detect those signs of autism?
That's totally true. Very young age, and then it's always like he will grow out of it. And it's always like we notice this, but then he's very little. So the main features which are there, there are so many features and so many behaviors which we can detect and parents can see. And then it's always like, let's wait and see. But the main 5 or 6 ones which come together, it's number 1 is like, my child is not talking. So he's 1, and then he's 1.5, then he's 2, and he's still not talking. And that's very important, because language development, like by 1 year, he should have a few words and use them, but he doesn't have any word, maybe 0, maybe a few words, but again, he's not using them. So he can repeat what I say.
Okay.
He may sing some nursery rhymes, but then he doesn't use language for social communication. And that's, again, it's very important. The next one takes us to that he does not know his name. So when I call him, he doesn't turn, he doesn't respond, and he doesn't look me in the eye. Eye contact is very limited and maybe none. He's always keeping his eyes away, and he doesn't interact, he doesn't play with kids. So he may be around the kids, he's sitting there, but he's not initiating anything with them, he's not playing with them, and when we force him, he's not interested. And even he's not interested in communicating with adults, with parents, with caregivers. He has flapping, which is hand flapping, or he tiptoes, or he has rocking of the body. And then he has limited interest, so he has certain toys or things which he's interested, and he puts his all focus into it. Like he may like or love cars, and he puts them in a line. He may open and close the doors. He may spin the wheels, and he loves everything or anything spinning. He may be spinning himself and going round and round. And so there are so many features which the mother can detect. And even sometimes the mother may not notice them, especially if it's the first child and that young age, but then the grandparents may notice, or the nursery teacher or other caregivers. And it's always important to know that if you feel there is something wrong, then let's think about it and see what we can do about it.
You made a very good and important point as well, is that other caregivers, not just the mom or the parents, would notice something. And sometimes the parents are somewhat in denial, maybe because, as you said, maybe their first child, or they just love their children so much.
True.
And they think that, no, my child is perfect,
That's
nothing
right.
is going wrong. And so other people would maybe detect this. What's the approach to explaining maybe to the parents, especially, for example, at school or at work, or their family or friends?
Sometimes these behaviors or these characteristics are noticed by other people, and as we said, maybe the mother doesn't notice them, and maybe she noticed, but then there is some advice because of the young age, and because the language development especially may come later on in many kids, so they will advise her to, it's okay, you know, his cousin was the same, or his father may have been the same, you know, and he talked at 3 or at 4. So just wait, and that's true. And we can wait unless there are other things playing in the area, like it's not only the language, it's the communication. It's not only the communication, language, verbal, non-verbal, it's also the repetitive behavior. So there are other things which, if we put them together, it makes the red flags more. So it makes the concern higher. So we have to look into it. So whenever, whoever tells, like, wait, we always say wait and watch and see and then act.
That's very important for them, as you said, to wait and detect and stay focused with their children. But after that, you said they're going to act upon it. What would they do? Would they go consult a doctor?
True.
And what would the process be?
I think the most important thing is to look for a doctor or a professional who can help you professionally. He has the eyes of his profession, he has his expertise, he has his studies and education, so he can help you more than the general population. So look for a good one. In the clinic, I prefer to see a doctor who is a pediatrician, probably because autism is a clinical diagnosis, and anybody who wants to diagnose or assist the child suspecting having autism, he has to have that clinical area, clinical experience. So look for a good doctor and go and seek his advice. And the doctor will help a lot. He will do the tests which are needed, he will assess him using many tools, and he will look into things. And not all these difficulties are autism. So he can tell you if he goes under the umbrella of autism or autism spectrum, or there is something else, or just it's a language delay, you know. And it's very important to know a doctor or to go to a doctor or other professions who can help and be part of the team, because sometimes it's really only language, you know, and you can tell, or the profession can tell that it is only language. I mean, if I may say an example, I had this little child who came to me, and he was like coming because he's not talking. He was around 4, 3.5, 4, and then it is like query autism. And when I sat with him, I just noticed that he doesn't have his teeth in the front. And I asked him, what happened? And he gave me the whole story without saying a word. And
Wow.
I could tell that he had a fall and he lost his teeth. He went to the hospital and he was bleeding, and they treated him. And he didn't say a word. It was all gestures and pointing and waiting for my questions and nodding like you're doing.
Yeah.
And I got the story, and I went to the mother and told her, did he fall? And he said yes, and lost his teeth, and yes. And you know, it was so interesting that he could reach me and tell me and explain without verbal language, without words. So language and language communication is not only words, and that's the part which is missing in autism. So when we look at language development in autism, it's like the verbal and the words and the gestures and body language and pointing and sharing and telling without the words. And he also there cannot do that. Yeah.
That's very interesting, because as you said, they could express themselves through other ways, not just verbally, but maybe physically explaining things with their hands or gestures, using their face as well.
Right.
So doctor, can you tell us more about how and what would happen in their school? Because if their parents know and aware of that they've got autism, and then they have a doctor that follows up with them and their case, what happens in school?
In school, it's important. In school, teachers are important part in his management and in his in helping him, this child. And usually they are at that age in the nursery stage or maybe KG1 and so. So the teachers should be aware of how to deal with him. The most important thing is that the teacher can attract him and make him part of the team who's working, and the team is full of these little kids who are interacting and playing and working. So she needs to put him there, and sometimes he may need special teachers or teachers with special education and the special training to know how to train him and deal with him and help him overcome these difficulties, especially that he prefers to be with his toys alone. And sometimes especially when the kids are in the like mainstream nurseries, my advice to the mother is always like, keep your eyes on what's going on, especially if the teachers and the nursery said he's doing well. So if they complain, you know that there is a problem and they cannot deal with it. But if they didn't, sometimes the kids who are on the autism spectrum, they are very relaxed and they are very good and well behaved if they are doing what they like. So if they are in front of the TV or with the iPad or with his cars which he's playing with, then he will not annoy the teacher, and the teacher would say like, he's fine, you know, he's really good. Why do you say he's hyperactive? Why do you say he doesn't communicate? He's playing with these with the iPads and with these educational things, and he's learning so much, but then he's not communicating. He's not using, he's not playing when you are playing. He's not eating when you're eating. He's not doing and coloring when you and your kid, the other kids are coloring. So these are very important for me and for the mother to look that he is not really into his comfort zone. He's pushed into communicating and working and sharing and being together.
It's very interesting because in school they have to interact with the teacher, and not just the teacher, maybe their classmates as well. So do the teachers tend to tell the other classmates how they communicate, or would it just be something that they can see?
If the teacher knows, then she can help the child find the way to communicate. If she couldn't, then she can't. She has to have that experience. And sometimes it doesn't have to be a lot of training. It's just like a human being and it comes from your heart. But kids, if they are on the autism spectrum, they really need help, and they need their management to include lots of things. So it has to be comprehensive, it has to be intensive, and sometimes it's not enough to be given in schools, so they have to go into training programs. Like in our clinic, Fatma Clinic, there are intensive training programs that looks into each parts and each areas of weakness for the child, and we try to help him in that area and put things which will help him overcome those difficulties. And it includes a lot of things: behavior modification, language development, skills, sensory integration is very important, and auditory integration is very important. So there are so many things which he needs to be done so that he comes out of that area, the area of no communication.
Yes, thank you so much, Doctor, for being here tonight with us.
It's a pleasure. It's great to be here. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you. We're going to cut to another report, so make sure you stay tuned.